Today we're going to take a break from all this multi-boxing, TLP, leveling stuff, and we're going to discuss some of the legendary expansions that made EverQuest one of the most enduring and iconic MMOs in history. Now, over its long journey, EverQuest has seen over 24 expansions, each of them adding unique zones, sometimes races, quests, and a lot of unforgettable moments. But which expansions truly stand the test of time? Let's go over some of the greatest EverQuest expansions that have shaped this game. So first up, overall, best expansion ever, the Runes of Kunark. At this point, people are playing the EverQuest Classic, and they're realizing how cool this game is. And Runes of Kunark, which is arguably the best expansion, added a massive amount of content. It was EverQuest's first expansion, and it introduced the vast continent of Kunark, the new race of Ixar, and the first level cap increase, which went from 50 to 60, and a lot of new dungeons and zones that not only felt intimidating, but they were wild. Zones like Sebelis and Karnar's Castle quickly became fan favorites. If you remember back in the day, if you played back in 2000, Train to the Zone, Karnar's Castle was very popular for that. It had basically two entrances or exits, left and right side. And if people didn't train to the right side or trained even to the right side, or if they trained the right way and even announced train, there was always somebody coming in from the left side that was too far up that got aggro, and it just made the train last forever with new people zoning in. And this also brought some of the iconic raids, and it really delivered on what an expansion should be. And then next up, Scars of Velius. This was the second expansion, and it brought basically the frozen world, the ice world, into play. This was the first expansion that introduced faction warfare. You could align with giants, dwarves, or dragons, and each of them had their own benefit. And the decision that you made infected your entire play experience on this frozen continent. Velius also came with epic battles and high-end raiding. A lot of the endgame raiders remember the Temple of Ishan. And just overall, it gave us basically unforgettable experiences. And it allowed us to explore the power struggle between Norrath's oldest races. Next up on this list, which this could be controversial because sometimes this is voted the best expansion ever. Others hate it because of some of the stuff it introduced, but the Planes of Power from 2002. This introduced players to the Plane of Knowledge, which was basically a central hub, and it really changed the way that people traveled in the game. Luckland kind of started this trend with its Nexus transportation system and the Spires, but when Planes of Power came out, it really got rid of the long runs between cities and with its teleportation books, and it really made the world more accessible. Some people really treasure the time sink and having to actually go and explore, I guess they would call it, running from zone to zone. And a lot of people complain that the Planes of Power type expansion really made the world smaller. And honestly, at this point with this expansion out, the world's really just too big. And I think one of the downfalls of video games was those time sinks as more and more popular games came out and more activities started to compete for our time. So this actually made it so the game was explorable. People would get to areas that maybe they've never really gone to before because it wasn't worth the run. Not only did the Planes of Power add convenience, but it also had some of the most memorable endgame content as players ascended through the elemental planes, facing the gods, and finally coming into the Plane of Time. This expansion was so popular that they actually have servers that are just pop locked. So it's not surprising that overall it's ranked in the top 3. And a lot of us have a lot of memories from here. I know I do, about having to get flags and then back flagging. And then finally they added the 85% rule. I remember being in one of the top rating guilds and we just had to keep going back and flagging. And then someone would leave the guild. New people would join, we have to flag them. So a lot of the content for back flagging and a lot of the loot was trivial at that point. So it was like we were only back flagging for recruits so that we could actually get to the Plane of Time. Next up from 2001, the Shadows of Luckland. So as I said earlier with the Planes of Power, the Shadows of Luckland introduced the Nexus and the Spires, kind of a hit at Wizards and Druids, taking away from that class as far as their importance for transportation, but still they're necessary. This was kind of an odd expansion with aliens and going to the moon. We also got the Vashir race and then the brand new class, the Beast Lord. And this also brought one of the biggest game changers, the alternate advancement system. Allowed people to continue to get experience to improve their character. And it also brought incredible high-level zones like Vexthal and SSRA Temple. It is a little bit of a mix of science fiction and fantasy. Kind of gave EQ this new vibe. A lot of people didn't understand this expansion, but as I said, the Nexus opened up fast travel and we cannot forget the Bazaar. No more East Commons Tunnel. Made trading easier. Definitely a very good expansion. Next up, the Lost Dungeons in Norrath from 2003. Now, some people didn't like this, but if you look at what the Lost Dungeon Norrath actually brought, it was the introduction of instanced dungeons, which is used in all of the game today. It's actually a core component of the game. This allowed players and small groups to do their fights and tackle obstacles and challenges in private instance areas. This was a major change where all the other zones were shared, so there's a lot of competition for things. It also allowed for players to actually be able to experience things that they otherwise would not have been able to because some other guild or high-end guild would be camping it. Like I said, this is a huge change. Allowed friends to play together without interruption from other groups or players. There's no trains. None of that stuff is going on. And it also brought on the adventure point system where players could earn points to spend on rewards. This system was also used later in the game, but it also allowed you to do these private instance dungeons, farm points, and improve your character. And it was more group friendly. Next up on the list from 2004, the Omens of War. Omens of War is really the last memorable expansion to come out before World of Warcraft pretty much came on the scene and destroyed pretty much every other game out there and still continues to dominate the MMO market. Omens of War raised the level cap to 70. I have a lot of experience in the Omens of War grouping and the Mermite Proving Grounds and the Citadel of Anguish for raiding and just farming like name mobs nonstop in the Wall of Slaughter and just a lot of stuff that I really remember. This is where I really picked up boxing heavily. Me and I think 4 or 5 of my friends all boxed several characters, and who was in the main experience group, we alternated. Like we each had like a spot that was reserved. And so we're always leveling like an alt inside this. And then all of our main characters were outside the group just doing damage to the mobs. And this also came with the introduction of the 2.0 epics. And I've always thought that one of the major downfalls of EverQuest after introducing the epics and the Runes of Kunark was to not continue to update them. Now they did pick it back up at Omens of War finally and introduced the 1.5 2.0, which later led to the 2.5. But I feel like it's something that they should have always kept up with is the epic quests and even upgrading your epic so that it was always relevant. I played a warrior early on, and after getting my epic and Runes of Kunark, it just was like a slap in the face that other items are replacing those awesome weapons that I spent all that time getting. I know now on today, everything's like rush and get these items fast and stuff's trivial and easier, but it was quite the challenge without instant zones and tradable loot and having to wait for some of these mobs to be up and then being able to actually kill the mobs to get your epic. It was kind of reserved for mainly raiders, so it was a big deal, and to see that those items kind of fade in power over time until Omens of War was kind of disappointing. This expansion also balanced out, a mix of solo group and raid content. With zones like Riftseeker, Sanctum, Citadel of Anguish, like I said, Wall of Slaughter, the Epic 2.0 quests, they're iconic. Many players, spent hours working toward these, and Omens of War solidified the importance of end game progression, and it really gave goals that felt truly epic. Next up on the list, the Serpent Spine. This expansion was groundbreaking in a new way. It introduced Crescent Reach, which was a beginner-friendly city And it also introduced the Draken, which was a new race, dragon lineage. This expansion was the gateway for new players, offering basically a solo-friendly leveling path all the way to the level cap. And it made EverQuest accessible again. It gave new players and returning players an entry point into the game. And really was like a breath of fresh air, and it set the stage for really a more inclusive EverQuest. And then finally on the list from 2008, Seeds of Destruction. This is the expansion that introduced mercenaries. It allowed solo players the ability to hire NPC companions to help them on their adventures. And this opened up a lot of new possibilities for players who couldn't always find groups. Finding groups has always kind of been an issue, especially when the game has been out for so long and you're not doing the new content. It's always been a little bit hard to find groups to level in if you're not part of that initial rush. And mercenaries started to solve that problem. But also, let's be honest, this is 2008. World of Warcraft basically obliterated this and EverQuest 2. So the player base has shrunk dramatically. And, we're starting to see a lot of server merges and population decreases. And there's a point in this game where multi-boxing really wasn't optional. And that's one of the things that a lot of people are upset about EverQuest when I make my multi-boxing videos, etc. They always want to go back to when the zones are plentiful and there was always groups. But with the competition for your attention and time today, and unless you have like a solid raiding group or group of friends in the game, and a very social person, you almost have to multi-box in this game. Even if you're in a good raiding guild, I remember being in some of the better raiding guilds on Mischief, they are always having people bring in high demand boxes, whether it's clerics, shamans, or something that was missing, especially as the expansion that's currently out dwindles on, people start to leave and get bored. And it became almost impossible to raid, even on one of the higher end guilds. Like, you're just short of players or short of certain characters. So even people that don't multi-box regularly had to have an ult or a second box to get by in this game. The other thing Seeds of Destruction did was it also kind of played with the time travel element. It would put players in pivotal moments in the EverQuest lore, and it made the game really more flexible and allowed players of all play styles to dive into the content without feeling left out. Which, in order to compete with World of Warcraft, you had to start to gear the game toward the casual player. After watching World of Warcraft's success, which was basically made for casual players, it was really apparent to see how important that segment of the gaming audience was, where EverQuest has always been more of hardcore player focused, for me at least. I didn't really view it as ever a casual player-friendly game. So each of these expansions that we mentioned brought something unique. That's why they're in the list. There may or may not be expansions you feel that are in the list, but the ones that we named were kind of revolutionary and helped shape EverQuest into the MMO it is today. So whether you're a returning player or a new adventurer, these expansions, they offer timeless experiences, unforgettable challenges, and obviously not everybody's going to agree with this list. Some people might agree with the list and it'll be ranged around, but that's what we have comments for. I want to know what you think. Leave a comment below. Tell me your top 5, your top 8, your favorite expansions, and go ahead and tell us why. Just don't blurt out an expansion and without explanation. Tell us about some of the experiences you had, some of the things you remember, and why you think it deserves the spot that you're giving it.
We got P99, we got TLP, we got private servers and tests that's free. Some of us pay, some of us don't, some of us play, some of us won't. Did you just break my mess? Did you just train me? Did you just miss a healing? Are you gonna rest me? And please I need a sow, and please I need a rest. Please I need that sword, I'll take what you got.